All right, well, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about tough decisions, the complexities of maintaining a popular open source project. I'm Jessica Janiuk. I am a staff software engineer on the Angular framework team at Google. And a little bit about me, make sure I'm on the right window so I can actually move my slides. A little bit about me. I currently live in the San Francisco Bay, and I'm a huge geek as depicted here. I also build Star Wars droids for fun as a hobby, and I like to travel and do photography. And I also made that very, very weird Angular serial video. Yeah, if you haven't seen that, it's available on the Angular YouTube channel. And I joined the Angular team about 5 years ago. And along with that comes with maintaining an open source project. A lot has changed since then, but that makes me now an open source maintainer. Angular is used by millions of people worldwide, and it has a very wide public API. So doing this work as an open source maintainer comes with a number of tasks, and you are probably familiar with a lot of these, but these are not specific to Angular. These are specific to pretty much any open source project, really any project. So we work on new features. We triage incoming pull requests and issues. I think the difference between working in a big open source project and triaging issues and pull requests versus something that might be smaller is the scope and scale of how many of these come in, and the number of issues that you'll see on a big open source project like Angular is a lot higher than you would maybe have on a smaller team or smaller project. Additionally, we do typical stuff like prioritization and planning because every project has a direction that they want to go and things that they want to prioritize working on. And then, of course, like any other project, we fix bugs. And those bugs we may be fixing, other people may be fixing, but we do a lot of this. So historically, we can take a look at how Angular has looked on this front. This is repo trends. If you've never visited them, you can take a look. But you can see the overall history of how the current Angular repo has looked over the past probably decade here. And clearly, at the top of that peak on the left side, when those issues were the highest, obviously that's when I joined the team. And of course, it started dropping off a cliff then because I started closing all the issues. Yeah, it was a team effort. Um, but you can see we put a lot of effort into working on issues, closing issues, trying to make an effort to keep that issue count relatively stable. It is a problem that any open source repository has to deal with overall. Right now, we're hovering around about 1,000 open issues and about 100 pull requests open on average. This vacillates a little bit higher, a little lower, but right now that's about where we are. And this is normal for a large, mature open source project. React right now, for example, has around 800 issues and 230 PRs. Vue has approximately 650 issues and 400 PRs, and Svelte has about 850 with 50 PRs. This is just looking at the main core repos. There's always supplemental repos that have stuff in them too, but in general, this is very common to have this many issues and pull requests that are open at any given time. And there's a lot of different types of issues that come in, and we can take a look at maybe some of those. Obviously, some of them are going to be simple bugs and quick fixes, and those would, of course, be addressed very quickly because they're simple bugs with quick fixes, so they don't stay around very long. We also get support requests, and any repository might have their own policies on how they handle this kind of thing. A support request would be like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing and I can't figure out how to do it." And the Angular policy here is that we actually redirect people to Stack Overflow or to use an LLM or whatnot for these because we try to keep the issue tracker for actual like bugs or feature requests. But other repositories may handle that differently. We also deal with things like user error. So people might report a bug, but it ends up being just confusion about how that feature actually works. And then this kind of points us to another problem, which would be documentation issues. So we end up having a bunch of those come in, and then we try to address those as fast as we can to try to make it easier for people to understand how our features work. We'll also get feature requests. That's fairly common. Sometimes we're creating them ourselves. Additionally, we'll get the more complex bug reports. So things that take a bit more time to triage might be a bit harder to fix. And some of these we fix relatively quickly, but some of them stay around. And then lastly, we get some that are complex bug reports, but people are really using the framework in some weird unintended ways. And really, the issue isn't a bug report so much as a feature request to support some really esoteric use case that we don't support. This happens on a regular basis, and that's the reality of those. But some of these issues stay around a long time, and here's an example of that. This is just kind of going to the Angular repo and sorting by oldest and open. You can see some of these are dated as 2015. Some of them, well, on the screen here are all 2015. So that's 10 years ago. These have been around for a while. Angular's not the only repo that has, issues this old open. Here's some from React. They show 2013, 2014, 2015. Vue has some from 2020. Svelte has some from 2017. It's very normal, very, very common to see issues that stick around this long. And when an issue sticks around this long, I don't know how it is exactly for other frameworks, but this happens for us quite a bit. But we get very, let's say, passionate people leaving very interesting comments. Oh, things have been around. Why is this closed with no fix? Why has this been open for so long? Very, like I said, passionate people who really just want to see their issue get fixed, and things remain open. And rest assured, the answer to this is if these issues were easy to fix, we probably would have fixed them by now. But the reality is this happens on every repository. So why does this happen? Why do these issues stay open for so long? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. The real answer is obviously because we don't care. We don't care. I'm kidding. Obviously, we care. The reality is, we actually really care. We care a lot. We obviously wouldn't exist as large open source projects without people who are interested and where we didn't have a huge community. So we want to do right by our community. We want to do right by our users. And I can guarantee that any open source project out there is also wanting to do the same. So the real reason why these issues stay open so long is because it is complicated. I know, very unsatisfying answer to that question, but let's go through a few of the reasons why. So just a few of them, prioritization and roadmap, resource availability, issue breakiness, impact size of that issue, how many people are actually affected by it, shifting team knowledge base, team members change in and out, breaking change windows, which we'll talk about a bit in a little bit, the frequency that issue occurs, the commonality of the use case, and the effort overall involved to fix it. There's also the cost benefit analysis of like, if we put this much money, which is engineering time, do we get the same benefit out of it at the end? And there's a whole host of others, but yeah, this is just a short list of why many of those may not be like, they may linger for a while. So let's break this down and talk about a few of them. starting with prioritization roadmap and resource availability. So, as much as it would be really nice if resources were infinite, they aren't. Resources are truly limited, even at the big, huge companies where you might have this impression that there's all the resources under the sun. Team sizes are finite, budgets are finite, and the reality is that if we commit to fixing a complicated, long-standing issue, we're actively taking resources away from something else. And we can choose between fixing that bug that may be really challenging, take a lot of time, or we can focus on adding a new feature. It comes down to the classic tech debt versus new features balance that you have to do. Everybody has their roadmap, and you have to deal with this balance all the time. And for an open source project, a long-standing open issue would be something we would classify as tech debt because it's something that needs to be addressed. So we have to look at it that way. Additionally, teams change. The structure of the team may change. For example, the Angular team right now is not at all the same team, both from when I joined and even from back when Angular was created. And a lot of the issues that have existed that were created back in 2015, the people who are on the team have almost completely changed over since then. So when people leave the team or any project really, some of their knowledge is going to go with them. This is inevitable. It affects any project anywhere. And it can make it really hard to tackle some of these long-standing issues because they maybe took the context with them. Or maybe those issues were opened by that person, or they were assigned to that team member, and there's a whole bunch of context that they had that is now lost. So that's a couple of factors. Let's talk about impact and use case. So if you have an issue that has a high commonality, it is much more likely that it's going to get fixed faster. So you have like an issue that's affecting everybody, of course it's going to get fixed faster. And maybe you're looking at this chart going, cow? Well, I'll let you can probably guess this was created by an LLM, and it seems to have some issues with what chart axes should be and scaling. Obviously, low, low, high, high, 2020, 1000, 1000. I don't know. But what you can take away from this is that if your issue is around the cow level, we'll obviously take a look at it, and you'll get results as fast as possible. So looking at this little square here from earlier, those complex bug reports that are like kind of off the rails, the reality is, they kind of, oh, I don't think the video is showing. Boo. Well, hopefully you can see it. Good. Okay, you can see it. Yeah. So, yeah. If your issue is off the rails, like the train here, you kind of need to stop and maybe think about that use case because it may be that uncommon. And what's likely to happen is, we're going to be confused as to what you're doing, and then we're likely going to be like, no, I think we're going to close this and move forward. So you really need to think about that when you are looking at stuff like this. So breaking changes. Breaking changes are something that can be very sensitive on open source projects. It depends on how projects approach these, but for the Angular side, here's an example of a breaking change PR. You can see we actually have people putting breaking change in the pull request description. We have some labels for it, but the breaking change here is, since Angular is TypeScript based, we're just changing a type from any to something more specific. And this is enough to be considered a breaking change for us because it's going to break people's compilations. And this can be really challenging for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes these changes seem simple, but they end up being a lot more complicated. It even gets more complicated when you have something that has a lot of people might think is a currently broken implementation. And we'll get this comment a lot. But this problem is already it's already broken. Shouldn't we just fix it? Well, yes, but also no, because people now expect that feature to be broken. They have coded around its broken state. And then if we fix that, we end up breaking them again. So obviously for new users that have never used it before, they want it to be working right the first time. But like if you have something that is in this situation, you're going to break people, and you have to think about that as you are maintaining your repository. You have to think about your users and what's going to be the best way to land this kind of change. So it can be very challenging. And sometimes those implementations that are the breaking change implementations are super technically correct, but it's still breaking. And there is a high cost associated with that. And it's not just like the time that it takes to deal with fixing those breaking changes. There's the more frequently we have breaking changes, the heavier the burden it has on the end user for updating, not just in like changing code, but changing their mental processes when they work in certain areas where we've made that change. And if you've worked with Angular, you'll be like, well, what Angular has migrations. What about automatically migrating people? Shouldn't you just migrate them? And in truth, yes, that is true. And anytime we have a breaking change, we do our best to create a migration. But some things are inherently not automatically migratable. For example, anything that changes styling is just not migratable. It's going to break people's layout. Additionally, sometimes data structures change in a way or where they are also not migratable. An example here would be recently Angular developed a new control flow syntax. We created a migration to go from our old version to our new one. And in that process, some patterns that people were using before um, actually can't be migrated to the new structure just because the new structure is more strict to what native JavaScript does. And therefore, they run that migration. Most of their app is migrated, but there's still manual work for them to have to do. So there is always some burden that is put on people during breaking changes. We have something we call a breaking change window, and I don't know if all open source repositories do this, probably not, but we do. Angular does major releases twice a year, so roughly every 6 months. And we also do, in between those majors, we do two minor releases, and our breaking change window opens after that second minor goes in. So it's like that time, like roughly 6 weeks, 2 months before the next major goes out. That's when breaking change window opens. And so we can land all of our breaking changes then, but let's say you're a contributor and you create a PR shortly after a major version goes out and it ends up being a breaking change. Well, we can't land that for another several months until that breaking change window opens. So it would have to wait until then, which is another challenge that we have to deal with. So sometimes we have to say no to very valid changes. And the reason for this is because sometimes the effort to land that valid but breaking change is just too high for us to commit to at a given time. It's really unfortunate when this happens. It's happened a few times, quite a few times since I've been on the team. And it's like we really want to land the change. It would make a big difference. But for all of the various reasons I've talked about in this talk already, like priorities and resource availability, this is just the way that it goes in those situations. Sometimes we try to revisit them later, but that is the unfortunate reality. So on the support side, uh, I think a lot of people maybe forget that when it comes to these big open source repositories, that the moment code is submitted, it becomes legacy code, and that any change that we merge is change that we have to support. So we have to be very comfortable with any PR, any code change that comes in, and that means it has to be maintainable code. So, you may be a clever girl that comes in and writes some very clever code, but clever code is often not very maintainable. So we sometimes, may say no or request changes on that kind of implementation because we want to make it easy to support later and easy to follow for future maintainers. Another complication that Angular has that I know probably most other open source projects don't have is that we are a Google owned framework and we have to contend with the fact that Angular is heavily used within Google. It is the most heavily used framework within Google. And Google is famous for having a monorepo, which obviously, if you're unfamiliar with the concept of a monorepo, this is where we keep all of the copies of the mononucleosis virus. Uh, no, no, that's wrong. No, a monorepo is where we keep code. Sorry, little confusion there. So Angular being open source, it starts in GitHub, and then we validate all of those changes against all of those applications in Google. So we run tests against applications and whatnot. And along with the monorepo comes the policy of you break it, you fix it. So uh, we simply cannot break people. This is just the reality of working with the monorepo within Google 3. And that means we have a higher burden for breaking changes. We have to have migrations that work. And we have to really truly respect that breaking change window. So when we run these breaking changes, we run the tests within Google. Sometimes it doesn't break anybody, and that's how we know it's not very breaky. But sometimes it also, it might break a couple apps, which isn't that big a deal. But sometimes it breaks thousands, and we have to weigh that when we look at what we're going to take on as a migration or as a breaking change fix. And this is a reason why sometimes we have to say no. We have this benefit of like having this repository of knowledge that we run all of Angular against to know exactly how likely it is to be breaking for the rest of the general population. So it's kind of a benefit for us in that regard. But the migration effort can be exceptionally high. And we have to continue to think about, again, the tech debt thing. How valuable is it? How important is it to fix the broken issue? How much are we able to commit to get it there? These are really tough questions. And while we have to think about this for Angular, every open source project, every big open project that has to be maintained has this. The cost of breaking breaking changes just is a very real factor that we think about. It gets very expensive very fast. So to summarize, yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of reasons. If we close an issue and don't fix, or we close a PR and don't fix, it's not that we're saying no because we don't care. We obviously care deeply, and we would love to see all these fixes land. But the truth is, open source maintainers, we're doing our best. So just keep that in mind when you're interacting with your favorite GitHub repository, or if that repository lives elsewhere, keep that in mind. So here's a list. Let's say you want to get your preferred issue fixed. Let's do a quick burn down of things that you should really think about as you're doing that. So number one, read the documentation about the thing you're trying to do so that you have a deep understanding, or at least a reasonably good understanding, that you're kind of in doing the right thing, or that you've got your code that's structured in the right way. And then next, ask yourself, is your use case actually on the rails or off the rails? Is it a rocket train blasting off into space? And then if it isn't, maybe think about that before moving forward. Next step, you can ask the community. So there's Discords, Reddits, you have colleagues, social medias. Go there, see if you can find people who maybe are familiar with what you're doing, get more information there. Then next, go to the GitHub and search for maybe existing issues, both open and closed, that maybe match your existing situation. And maybe you'll be able to find some useful information from those. Let's say you don't find any issues, then go ahead and create that issue. When you do create that issue, please create a reproduction and please make sure it is the minimal shape of that reproduction. When we say minimal, because we ask for minimal repros a lot on Angular, it essentially doesn't mean like upload your whole app or upload a big section of your proprietary app. What we're looking for is the smallest possible shape of code that can reproduce this behavior. So when you do that, you make the maintainers of whatever repository you're reporting to very happy, because it's much easier to try to deduce what's happening in that situation. This should probably go without saying, but don't spam the maintainers. That isn't really going to result in a good interaction with people. Similarly, don't harass or act hostile towards the maintainers. This is a great way to get banned or to get your issue closed. Be kind. And then if the maintainer asks you to do some things, like test out a few things or recommend try doing something to see if it fixes an issue, please just follow those, work with them, and hopefully that'll help move things forward. They're just trying to figure out what's going on. Even better, submit a PR along with your issue that actually does the fixing. Oh my gosh, we love it when you do that. Even better, submit a PR that does the fixing with test coverage. Oh my gosh. Even bestest, do that. And also with test coverage and documentation. Oh my God, we love you so much. You get a gold star. And then lastly, please don't get mad at us if it ultimately doesn't land for any of the aforementioned reasons. Again, we're doing our best, and yeah, we're people too. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the talk. I just wanted to say thank you. Again, I'm Jessica Janiuk. I'm on the Angular Framework team. You can follow this QR code if you would like to follow me on socials. And that's pretty much it for the talk. Yeah, I'm eager to hear if you have questions. Nope, can't hear you.
I'll take over. He was just going to hand me the baton anyway. Are you back? Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Easy.
We can hear you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for this talk. That was all I wanted to say. And Paul, you can take it away.
Sure. A lot of great points and humor. I got to admit, we had a lot of fun with the Skeletor. More fun than we should have. You could have done like a Skeletor talk, and it probably would have been just like crushing it. We'll go with the first one. Let's see. I like this question. It has a little bit of nuance to it. Because at least Google is faced with this, and there's an intersection between I can't remember if you said hundreds of internal projects or 1,000 that consume Angular, but you have a lot of stakeholders that aren't visible to the outside world. And so not only is this a question between which is harder, this or this, but also the combination.
Yes, that does make things very challenging. And if we were to look at this for like private versus open source, open source, you tend to have a lot of invisible stakeholders, because people you don't really know how many people are fully using it. You have ideas from like stars and downloads off of npm and stuff, but in truth, you really don't have a fully clear idea of what people are doing, how people are doing it. In a private situation, let's say you're maintaining a project internally at a company, you likely know every stakeholder and you can directly communicate with them, get very clear wants and needs, and use that for priorities. And you can also probably have easier methods of breaking them if you need to. You can probably talk to the individual people that are using and consuming whatever project you're working on and be like, hey, can you coordinate with me on this breaking fix?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the open source world, you can't really do that. So it can, and it, in the open source world, it can make people pretty upset if you break something that they're very familiar with.
Oh,
So,
indeed.
oh, we got a tail.
Yes.
Like
We have
I
a
have a guest.
runner. Let me do a review of the poll. The question was, how do you feel about Angular's evolution as it moves towards more community input? The clear winner was appreciate stability with half of the votes. Okay, here's one to bring up. I guess you should have seen this one coming.
Okay, is Gemini AI being used for triage of open issues? We have considered this.
Hmm.
It's not really being used for that purpose right now. We occasionally use it for code reviews. So if you look at pull requests, you might see that on open pull requests, but we are not currently using it for triage of open issues. But we are also very aggressively, looking at issues as they come in. So really, at the moment, I would say we don't really need it because we're pretty well on top of it. But it's certainly something we have considered.
Okay, we've got one. This was the second part of a phrasing of the question. And it was the first part was about, are there any initiatives towards or frameworks towards web quality?
I guess I'm curious what is meant by web quality in this case,
Yeah,
because
I'll
I'm not,
take it to
that's,
mean things like Lighthouse and
oh, yes. The answer there is yes. Um, we have actually worked directly, and actually all of the open source frameworks have worked directly with the Chrome team to put efforts in to native primitives and frameworks to improve
oh wow,
stuff like Core Web
is
Vitals.
that
Like,
under
for
the flag of
example,
Core Web Vitals?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
great.
So, for example, on the Angular side, we have an image optimization directive that was done directly in partnership with Chrome to improve how we handle image loading, to improve people's Core Web Vitals. And there's been a number of others,
Mhm.
but that's a core example of that.
We have 3 good questions from Andrew, and I'll bring the first one up. And Jan, you can tell me while Jessica's reading this how we're doing on time.
We are doing not good.
So, Jessica, you're on speed round.
Okay. Need strong mental resilience. Yes. Yes. It also depends on the charter of the team too, because
Mhm, mhm.
the Angular team is great in this regard. So like when people are really mean or whatever through GitHub, we have a code of conduct and we can very easily be like, hey, this is in violation of that. But it can be challenging, yes, because a lot of people take it personally when we close an issue, even if we're trying to be kind. And I've
Mhm.
gotten, comments I've made where people thumbs down them, into oblivion, and that's just the reality of it. But we got to do what we got to do with our jobs. So
One of the Python documentary came out last month, and one of the biggest points in there was when Guido rage quit as BDFL because of the abuse he took over a language decision. And so we all need to keep pushing this out there. Be kind to the people who give you so much. All right, speed round continuing.
how do we decide when it's time to release breaking changes? I'm sure this is going to vary between open source projects, but really for us, it's always the breaking change window. And it's like that happens once every 6 months. And we look at potential breaking changes and we have to weigh the scope of those breaking changes. So
Mhm.
it all comes down to that, what's pressing and what needs to happen. And then, when we have contributors that create breaking changes, we try to work with them on creating migrations and whatnot. So it's a complex back and forth,
Mhm.
figuring out that kind of thing.
His follow on was related to this, so I won't bring it up. We can go ahead and close out the questions here. And I tell you, I'm going to steal about half your slides because some of that was just chef's kiss.
Thank you. Thank you. I had fun putting it together.
Also, good luck for your VidConf talk next week, I think it is.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm really
Should be
excited
fun.
for Vite's future in Angular. I've just very curious to see what you are presenting there. I'll definitely watch it.
Good. Looking forward to it.
Anything else we got? Otherwise, we can let Jessica go get some coffee.
Jessica, you still owe us like 10 more puns backstage in the room. So
Yeah,
your
always.
quota isn't met yet.
Yeah, it never really is.
Success breeds success.
Indeed. All right. Well, live long and prosper, everyone.
Thank you so much.